Hey Charles, how you doing?
Hello, hello. How is your evening going?
It's very well. It's very well. Before I kind of start talking to you, the best thing to do is just could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Charles Handler. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. I specialize in talent assessment and now really AI-based, predictive talent intelligence. I've been doing that for, I don't know, 20, 25 years with my own company, Rocket Hire, and we advise enterprise companies, but also work with a lot of startups where I'm super into technology and I blend kind of the technology, the legal and ethics, and the sound science things all into one, and that's what I do.
Fantastic. Now, you've been on my podcast. I've been on your podcast. And when I was on your podcast, you made me the guinea pig in a whole new sort of feature set that you had. And thank you very much for the T-shirt that came with it. That was
Oh, good.
brilliant. So I thought I would not get my own back, but I thought I would repay the compliment, and we'd have you on this. We'd have you on this first show.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, assessment is it's such an interesting topic to kind of me at the moment. Give us a little bit of a perspective on how assessment sort of evolved in the last couple of years as you see it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because in some sense it hasn't, and in other senses it has, right? So the foundation, if you think about traditional assessments, which are all the things people tend to hate doing, I always say people don't like taking tests. Nobody likes taking tests, but they're important, and those kind of things where you're answering a bunch of questions about your attitudes or what you like or don't like, or a bunch of you know numerical problems, or hopefully even some more situational things. Those have pretty much been the same for a long time. But what we have happening now are more what I call predictive uh, talent intelligence tools or predictive hiring tools, where there's any kind of data or information is being used to make predictions. And we can see why that is. There's a lot of friction. It's hard to get noticed. It's hard to, I call it signal, right? It's hard for a person to get their signal through, and organizations to be able to differentiate between all those signals to find people who are the best fit. So everybody's looking for the best advantage with the least friction. So we kind of have these two things going on. There's not a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram, to be honest. Most of what you find in the world of assessment now is behind the scenes. We're building these things using large language models to help us, just like everybody pretty much is using large language models to get some of the drudgery out of the way, so we can free up our best brains, right?
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about how that's working because I think everyone will have noticed the kind of explosion of new assessment offerings on the market, the promise of what AI can deliver and what it can do, the controversy about AI making selections and all these kind of things. What
Yeah.
does that look like? What does AI and assessment look like at the moment, and what should people kind of really be aware
Yeah.
of when we're looking at these solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, not a simple answer to that, but I'll do my best to distill it. So, if you're just taking a personality test or some kind of scenario based test or whatever, especially interviews, structured interviews are assessments, right? Large language models behind the scenes, people like myself are saying, all right, I need to make a test for this particular type job, help me with some questions, or help me understand what it is about the job that I need to measure. So it's really the same, it's just the people behind the scenes are utilizing these tools for an advantage. But then you kind of move into, okay, we're going to find some information about a person, or even go out there and scan the web and scrape the web, whatever, and find individuals whose resumes meet our job description, or whose social media profiles meet our job description, whatever. So you have a mating of resumes and job descriptions, two of the famously worst pieces of information that you can get, right? And they're
Yeah.
necessary evils, but they have a lot of room for improvement. So you're building a lot of matching just based on those things, and then from there you also have the idea that these things on these two pieces are being distilled into or interpreted as skills. And so you've got a lot of this talent intelligence that's skills based, and we all know skills based hiring is a very laudable thing, but execution wise, and that's another question. There's some for another day, probably. There's some difficulties, and a lot of that is these skills. They're not labeled. They're just a grab bag of basically labels that don't have any definitions. I meant to say they're not defined. So
Mm,
again, that makes it pretty difficult to truly understand what's going on. So that's common, and then kind of in the middle we have AI based video interviews. We have regular video interviews. We have many that are scored by AI and now delivered by AI. I mean, I was at HR Tech, and you can create, deliver, and score an interview all with an avatar, right? So
mm,
you're
mm.
doing that all. And are those good? Who's to say? I mean, I think there's a lot of variation, but what you have to look out for is really the fact that are you truly measuring or collecting signal about what's real from a person,
Mm.
rather than okay, there's all this stuff in the ether and we're going to make this interpretation. So that's to me where the difficulties lie. And in the assessment tools, we have pretty good ways to detect bias. They're very transparent. So you give it to people you understand. Do different people, answer differently? Are the words and language predisposed to bias? And you can manage with that. But in some of these other tools where there's not very transparent things going on in the algorithms, it's hard to say. It's hard to
Mm.
say how discriminatory they are, really. So there's that question I think that concerns people as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think you, as you say, we're talking about job descriptions and resumes because they're written in language, and this is large language models interpreting language. It seems
Yeah,
like an obvious and easy kind of thing to do, but assessment is a science, isn't it?
it
This
is.
is
Yeah.
peer reviewed science that people like you have studied for many years. And is there a risk that people will choose solutions that don't meet that kind of same scientific rigor?
Yeah, I think very much just what I've been speaking about. It's all about friction and reducing it and being able to handle a large volume, right? So
Mm, mm,
there's more candidate information than can be processed in most situations. So you got to have something. And if then you say, well, you know what, a test is kind of a pain in the butt, or we that's a whole new thing. But if you have already a platform that you're using for talent acquisition and it has some of these tools, these matching tools built in, I think it's a lot easier of a thing to look at. I hope that the two will come together more,
mm,
and you'll have more
mm,
people saying, "All right," and I think it's slowly getting there. Well, how can we bake the science into the AI? If you know what I'm saying, and I think there's ways to do that. I also think though that I just finished doing a thing. It's not out yet. Kind of an interview project. I interviewed 20 people who do what I do for giant global organizations about their use of AI in their testing programs, and I think it's only like 15% are using any kind of AI tools, and they all cite the uncertainty about legislation, the uncertainty about um, bias and transparency, as these giant companies are just not ready to begin using those type of tools. And most of them have used some of these talent intelligence tools in a trial basis and are not convinced they
mm,
work very well. So
mm.
it's still kind of two worlds
Yeah.
going on. But I fear, quite honestly, that the latter is going to replace the world of assessment, and that people who are in the assessment business better start figuring out ways. I think we might be 4 or 5 years out, but again, the friction of asking somebody to sit for a test, even 20 or 30 minutes at lower levels, if you're an executive, you're used to getting assessed. That's a whole different
Mm,
paradigm. So
yeah.
something's going to probably have to give over time. And again, I hope the circles overlap. That's what I'm working on. I'm working with a couple startups. We're using large language models to build assessments and to classify jobs. And hopefully, the fact that people like me are doing that will be give us a lot of hope.
No, yeah, exactly. And I'll come in a second. I want to come back and talk a little bit about your kind of vision for the future. Before I do that, I think you sort of touched on an interesting point there. And I was reading what you posted about a recent presentation you did on AI and psychological safety at
Yeah.
work. Tell us a little bit more about that because it's a kind of fascinating topic.
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty interesting presentation because it was at It was at a local AI conference. I'm based here in New Orleans, not a hotbed of industry really. We have other good stuff going on, but so I got invited to do this thing, and I got there, and it was all really a philosophical AI thing more than anything. There was a lot of artists, a lot of discussions, which is a fun part of it. But I had prepared basically a corporate style presentation about this, and I quickly pivoted and said, you know what, that's not what these people want to talk about. But it was cool to be able to relay and think about that, right? So psychological safety is really um, the ability to express oneself in the workplace and feel listened to and valued, right? You're not just a cog in a machine, and you have to have that feeling, I believe, to be able to really engage in your work and create that truly symbiotic relationship between an employer and employee. And we were speaking a little bit earlier, about different scenarios with culture, and how is the management connecting to someone based on their comings and goings on time. I mean, those are the kind of things um, that can erode or build a sense of psychological safety, and you really have to have that to do well in your job. And I think AI
Mm.
creates a lot of pressures there, right? It creates a lot of pressure. You have possible surveillance. You have possible, is this thing going to take my job, right?
Yeah.
Those are two things. Are other people using it and getting an advantage over me? The company doesn't have a policy. What am I supposed to be doing? Is it good or bad? So, managing how AI is positioned, managing the engagement of your workforce around it is really important. And I think the hard part is the companies often don't know either, right? I mean,
Mm. Mm.
there's still a lot of policy making, a lot of we don't know what we're going to do yet. To my point earlier about AI assessments, but I do see, and I'd be interested, Matt, because you talk to a lot of people, probably more than me, in a wider variety of things. I see things like chief AI officer now being part of
Mm.
an organization, right? People putting together internal groups or think tanks to be able to say what is our policy. So I kind of feel like the
Yeah.
adoption curve, we're moving closer and closer, and
Yeah.
you read a lot of these bench reports that say 97% of HR professionals are using AI, and some of them say only 30%. It's really hard to
Yeah.
know. I would say
Exactly.
somewhere in
Is
the
it what
middle.
is yeah, exactly what's kind of going on out there.
Yeah.
Just give us like 10 seconds really quickly on, what's your positive vision for all of this? Where do you think it might take us? Just
Yeah.
give us
Well, I think
leave us with some
yeah.
thoughts.
I think we have a fantastic opportunity because what we're doing is measuring things about people that are relevant to the job. And by any means that we can do that is a great way to go. My biggest vision for the future, what I think is most exciting, is simulations, highly realistic simulations. So instead of taking a test, this interview could be a simulation of my ability to express my ideas or your ability to be a good host, which you're awesome at. So, and that could be evaluated by AI, and I've worked on some ideas for that too. And it used to be that the technology was not there to do these simulations. It was
Mm.
making a video of each instance, not very feasible. But we all know pretty soon you'll be able to type some words and generate a realistic video, and then you'll be able
Yeah.
to train the AI to score the relationship in that video. That's coming 100%, and that's
Absolutely.
what I'm excited about. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking to us, Charles.
yeah.
And yeah, keep an eye on this space with interest and see where we go.
Have a fantastic evening. I really appreciate the invite.
Thank you very much.